We're moving on to cluster number 9, questions 37 through 40 in the January 26 biology Regents exam. So this focuses on pitcher plants, which are carnivorous plants. You have some paragraph of information to read, and you have a diagram with some adaptations that these pitcher plants have labeled. Then you have a little more description. You have a model, and you want to analyze the model. So we're seeing this as a plant cell. We're focusing in on the chloroplast. We have sunlight entering, and then we have some unknown inputs and outputs. Okay, so then we get to the question, 37. Using the model, which statement identifies the energy conversion that occurs in pitcher plants? So when we look at this in the chloroplast, you should be thinking photosynthesis. Okay, and we know photosynthesis requires sunlight. It happens in the chloroplast of plants. So that's what we're focused on here. And so what is the energy conversion? Chemical energy in carbon dioxide is transformed into light energy. That's not correct. Plants don't produce light energy. They're not glowing. 2, light energy allows carbon dioxide to enter the leaf and glucose to exit. It doesn't really make sense. Glucose doesn't exit the leaf. 3, light energy is captured by the leaf and converted into stored energy within the chemical bonds of glucose. Okay, sounds good if you understand photosynthesis. Light energy is used to produce glucose. So that looks okay. And then finally, let's double check. Chemical energy in glucose is converted into light energy, stored it into oxygen. That doesn't make sense either. Our choice is 3. Give yourself +1 if you got that correct. Then we move on to the next set of questions. We have a little description about carbon dioxide levels. And we have a picture of a pitcher plant, and it shows external CO2 levels are 400 parts per million. Inside of this pitcher, it's 5,000. So a significant difference in carbon dioxide. Let's look at the question. Which statement predicts the movement of carbon? So if we're thinking about movement of carbon, we should be thinking here probably of diffusion and what we know about diffusion between the Earth's spheres that produce the difference in carbon dioxide concentrations. So if we're thinking about this in terms of the movement of CO2, we have very high levels of carbon dioxide inside the pitcher, and then outside we have much lower levels. Okay, and this outside, so think about the spheres, okay, geosphere, biosphere, atmosphere, hydrosphere. The plant represents the biosphere. It's a living organism. And outside in this air, that's the atmosphere. So we use all that information to look at the answer choices. So carbon dioxide in the biosphere, okay, in the pitcher plant, will move into the hydrosphere because the hydrosphere has a higher concentration. Again, this confuses diffusion. In diffusion, we have molecules moving from higher concentration to lower concentration. And so this choice doesn't make sense. It's the opposite. And that's going to be true of several of these. CO2 in the atmosphere will move into the biosphere, right? Because the concentration of carbon dioxide is greater in the atmosphere. That's incorrect. The level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is not greater. It's much lower. So 2 is incorrect. 3, carbon dioxide from the hydrosphere will move into the biosphere because carbon dioxide levels are greater in the biosphere. Again, this reverses the direction. And then we look at choice 4, carbon dioxide in the biosphere, in the pitcher plant, will move into the atmosphere because the biosphere has a higher concentration. That is correct. There is a higher concentration in the pitcher plant. Okay, that's higher concentration here in the biosphere and lower in the atmosphere. So that's how carbon dioxide will move. 38, the answer is 4. Give yourself a +1 in the margin if you got that correct. Then we have another long reading passage about nitrogen in these pitcher plants because they grow in nutrient-poor soils typically. Okay, you should definitely read that, highlight any important ideas that you find. 39 is a multiple choice question. How does the evidence given in this description support the claim that increased nitrogen makes the pitcher plants more effective at cycling carbon? So when we read in this paragraph, what we're finding is that scientists did an experiment. They planted these pitcher plants in soils that had high levels of nitrogen. And what they found is they produced fewer pitchers and more flat leaves. Okay, and that should make sense. The flat leaves are where most of the photosynthesis happens. Because they're growing in high nitrogen soil, they might reduce the energy they're putting into making these pitchers, because that's what the purpose of them is. So look at 39. How does the evidence support that? Pitcher plants that have sufficient nitrogen in their soil have less of a need to undergo photosynthesis? No, they have the same need for photosynthesis. Question number 2, the pitcher plant is in high nitrogen soils have less of a need to consume insects, so they use more of their leaves for photosynthesis. Okay, that seems to make sense. Let's continue though. 3, the pitcher plant in high nitrogen soil grows more flat leaves because they need other elements from insects to combine with the nitrogen. Okay, that doesn't make sense. And the flat leaves wouldn't be connected to obtaining more. It's the pitchers that would be important for digesting insects, so that's wrong. And number 4, pitcher plants produce more flat leaves, so they're better at obtaining nitrogen. Again, it's the pitchers that obtain nitrogen, and the leaves are for photosynthesis. 4 is incorrect. So question 39, answer is 2. Give yourself +1 if you got that correct. We move on to a little bit more reading and then another representation of what's going on. We have roots, the root system of this plant, and the shoot system, and some different parts labeled. And what we're seeing is nitrates entering into the root hairs that are part of this root system. So using that model above, describe how components of the two systems interact in the non-carnivorous plant to obtain nitrogen from the surrounding environment. So again, we're looking for two systems and how they're interacting. They've given us two systems, the shoot system and the root system. So we want to talk about how they interact. And so it's the root system and the root hairs, which can absorb nitrogen from the soil, and then it can be transported to the leaves in the shoot system, so that those nitrogen molecules can be used by the cells of the plant in the shoot system. Something along those lines, if you look at the choices, the root hair in the cell takes in nitrogen in the form of nitrates from the soil and transport it through the plants in the shoot system of the stem. A simpler answer, nitrogen is taken in by the root system and moved to the cells through the shoot system. So if you are connecting those two systems in your answer correctly, give yourself +1 on question number 40. And that's the end of this cluster.